Warning, this podcast discusses paranormal activity and other topics some might find disturbing. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, everybody. My name is Ashley, and welcome to another episode of Ghost Gossip. Today, we have a super special guest joining us. I don't even know where to begin. You have so many bullet points next to your name. I was Googling you last night, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't even know how to introduce them. Like, I've been practicing your name because I have a twang.
Oh, you're so good.
So is it Cavan Hendron?
Cavan Hendron.
Cavan Hendron. Put the wrong emphasis on the wrong syllable.
So good. I get called so many different things. So like anytime nowadays, I will just answer to whatever's closest. I'm like, oh, they're talking about me. Hey.
Exactly. It's like my mama. We were all A's, but if she was looking at me, she was talking to me.
Yep.
So
that part.
You made my little heart just explode last night. I was so excited.
Oh my gosh. Well, thank you for saying yes. It's one of those things whenever this is kind of new for us with figuring out, because there's no correct way to write a musical and have a musical kind of, come to be. There's no guidebook or handbook. And so for me, it's been like, well, how can we reach out to people that, are really entrenched within this community of this case, and how it really extends into different genres. Like, let's bring them along the journey, and open up the discussion about what it's been like to do this so far. So thank you for agreeing.
What I found, you wrote a book.
I did.
It is Behind My Smile and Memoir.
Yep.
You are a creator, a performer, and now
all the hats.
All the hats. And now you are a musical creator and writer.
Something I never thought I would do, and here we are, all these years later with this show in particular. It's really crazy, but very, very thankful and grateful to be here.
Well, I'm so glad you're here because I love musicals. I've always loved musicals, and I actually just went and saw one with my mom. I saw Kinky Boots, and
it's so good.
It is so good. Oh my gosh, I was just in awe because there's no way that I could get on stage and dance and sing at all. But then they're on these huge platform heels and hair and makeup. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I was in awe of all of them.
Oh, I've had friends that have done productions of Kinky Boots at different places across the country. And it's always so funny for me to hear they have to go through, a lot of them have to do heel choreography and heel lessons on how to walk in those heels because they're so tall. And I was like, couldn't be me, but more power to you for being able to dance and, kick your face and do all that with those heels on. It's very impressive.
Right. They're throwing their legs over their head.
Exactly.
It is wild. So now that we know who you are, tell me about yourself.
Yeah. So my name is Cavan Hendron. I was born and raised in Lexington, Kentucky, was adopted at a very young age of 2. And, that kind of became my identity growing up was, the adopted kid who didn't know their parents. And so being able to kind of grow up, though, with the most supportive and incredible family that I could have ever asked for, that kind of threw me in the arts. They saw this little, didn't know at the time, this little gay kid from the South who, wanted to just be themselves and play pretend, and threw me into theater and acting classes. And, I remember the first time that I came to New York to see shows was with my middle school. And being here in the city, I didn't know what it was at the time, but I remember leaving and I was viscerally sick. I had a feeling about leaving New York because something about it felt like home more than home did. And I didn't know how to put my finger on it and what it was. But then as I got older, I realized I was one of a number in New York. I wasn't the kid that was being bullied for, being different back home. I was able to kind of blend in with the crowd in New York. So then everything in my life kind of became a pathway on how to get back to New York. And so I moved here right after the pandemic. And it's truly just been crazy being able to look back at these last few years and just see how much I have grown and how much I have been challenged as a person and an artist, and how those things are so interconnected, and how, I mean, I wouldn't be here if certain things hadn't happened. And I'm a firm believer of the cliche saying that everyone, either loves or hates, that everything happens for a reason. But I truly believe that. And so it's been a wild ride, but I'm excited for, what's happening and what's to come.
That is amazing. That is so funny you said that because my last week's episode, or actually this week's episode, was I was supposed to go to Pennhurst up in Pennsylvania,
Hmm.
and everything went wrong. And my flight, after sitting in the airport and in a plane for 10 hours, finally they canceled it. And I never
Oh,
made it for a Paracon this past weekend. And I was so upset. I cried myself to sleep. I was just like, I just can't. And that was the gist. And that's what I believe also. Everything happens for a reason, whether we
yep,
understand or not. And I mean, it's true. I might never understand what happened, but something, my angels, my ancestors, the universe, God, whomever you believe in, I was being protected in some way, shape, or
yep,
form.
absolutely.
So that is amazing. I've been to New York in middle school and saw Beauty and the Beast on Broadway.
Was that your first Broadway show?
It was.
That was also my first Broadway show, so we're connected in that way.
It's so funny because like when you messaged me, I was like, I really like this person. I don't know what it is, but it was like instant.
See, I was one of those things whenever I found your profile, I was like, something just feels right about reaching out to her. Let's just like see what happens. And you were so gracious and so quick with your response. And so I'm just so happy that this was able to work out because, like I was telling you before we started recording, it's like one of those things where with writing a musical, there's no handbook on how to do it. And writing something as niche as Lizzie Borden with this whole case and this true crime lore, um, our conversation as a team has been, well, how do we tap into the dedicated group of people that, talk about this case and love this case, but beyond that, true crime and paranormal is like a whole, like that's a whole community that we kind of have, hopefully, behind us that we can then bring along with us on this journey as we, figure out what's next for our show and stuff like that as we continue to develop.
And you're right. I mean, it is usually theater, true crime, and paranormal. They're very separate worlds.
Hmm.
It's not often, I mean, you might see maybe like a fictional theater show portrayed through a
Yep.
musical, but usually not like something like Lizzie Borden.
Yep. It's actually interesting though, because there have been more than I realized whenever I decided that I wanted to write this show 6 years ago. Oh, 7 years ago now. Oh gosh, time's slipping away from me. What is time?
It is not real.
Exactly. But 7 years ago, when I started writing this, I didn't realize how many theatrical works that she has been included in or has inspired and things like that. I mean, there's the incredibly iconic Lizzie the Rock musical that, I say and tell people paved the way for us to even have a space with Borden being considered as as a show because they were the first to do it in a way that really brought her story, I think, to the forefront of theatrical storytelling. There had been versions of it before, but whenever people heard that I was writing this, they were like, well, why are you doing this when there's already something that exists? And it's like, well, that's the beauty about what we do as storytellers. No matter, where you come from, who you are, you're going to have a different perspective on a story. It's like just how there's two Great Gatsby musicals, how there's multiple Little Women musicals, multiple Wild Parties, the list goes on because we each have a different part of the story that resonates with us that we can then bring out within the story, which I love and think is so interesting that you can have multiple things on the same topic and they're each vastly different.
And they're also very valid and they're very important to the story. And because really nobody really knows what happened with
Hmm.
that. It's never been proven, it's never been solved. It is this mystery and everybody has their opinions on it. And I will tell you, I found this case, my friend Anthony Ghost Guy, he went to the Borden house and he had an amazing experience and he feels very connected, almost like you do to New York. He feels that way with Lizzie Borden.
Yep.
And ever since he's been there a few years ago, his first visit, he finds people that he met there or people who are wearing her shirt, or he actually sees her name on walls of like lists of patients and things. And it's just like,
Hmm.
it's all these synchronicities
Hmm.
that it just all seems to point back to her. And he truly believes that she didn't do it. And he has his own theory as to what happened. And it really opened my eyes because as a true crime person, I've heard the story, but it was, she did it. There's just no way she couldn't have done it, you know?
Yeah.
And then talking to him, and it was like, wait a second, I didn't know that.
Yep. It's one of those things. When I first discovered this case, I was 6 years old, and it was through a early Saturday morning episode of History's Mysteries that was on. I believe it was on the History Channel on our TV that morning. And I just remember sitting there watching it, way too young to probably be watching and learning about it. But, I've I've had my hyperfixations in life. I was also hyperfixated on the Titanic for a certain amount of time. So like things have just kind of found me, I think, when they were meant to find me and stuff. But I just remember watching that documentary about her. And the thing that struck me the most was, well, then why, if she was found innocent, she was acquitted, why do we still point the finger at her and call her the killer when we don't know? And, in a lot of ways, that case was the last true locked door American mystery because we will never know what happened. And that uncertainty always in history is the cause for so many different speculations and ways to point and blame certain people. But, that case, when it came to me at that age, it just has stuck with me and has been with me ever since. And then I was in college and I was in a solo performance class to write, one person shows. And the idea came back to me of Lizzie, and I was like, oh, she could be actually really fascinating for like a one person show. And the way that Borden actually started was in that class, and the entire show was just Lizzie. When the judge asked her, is there anything you would like to say right before the jury went to go reach a verdict? And Lizzie stood up and said, I'm innocent and I leave it to my counsel to speak for me. Before she said that, my show was going to be almost like a stop time moment and her kind of grasping with everything. And the show would have ended with everything kind of snapping back into reality and her saying
Oh,
that. And I wrote the show and it was great. And I still have it for if I ever want to do something again one day. But then as I kept sitting on the show, I was like, actually, there's something really interesting to me about Emma, the older sister. And so
yes.
that's what our show focuses on. Our show is from Emma's point of view. We use Emma as the device to tell the story because for me, I'm going to go ahead and let people know when they follow our musical. If they're looking for the murdery, big kind of that with the story, they're not going to get it from our show. Because for me, what was most important as I learned this case and researched this case over all these years, and have gotten to speak with, different Lizzie Borden historians. Prominently, Cara Robertson is one of our dear advisors on our production. She studied the Lizzie Borden case for over 30 years. The thing over the course of all those years that was fascinating to me, and I really wanted to tell, was this story at the core of it was about two sisters who were
Yep.
so incredibly close that they would have done anything for each other, and how we get to a point later on in their life when they are at the point with each other where they don't want to speak to each other ever again and they leave.
Hmm.
That relationship, as a storyteller, I'm like, there is so much there, and also that we don't know. So then what happened? So that's kind of what our show structures the story of, is like what happened to these two sisters who were once incredibly close that got to the point where they didn't want to be with each other at all.
That gave me chills when you were talking. I didn't want to interrupt you. Like my whole body just covered in chills. Like you are on the right path. Like this is like, and who am I? I'm just telling you, just listening to it, you're onto something.
Thank you.
And that
We'd
one,
like to think so too.
yes, absolutely. And then the one person solo show that sounds like it could be incredible.
See, it's still in my back pocket. Who knows? Maybe I'll add another Lizzie Borden show to the canon that's a completely different thing of what I wrote. Who knows? That's the really cool thing about a writer is I feel like, well, I don't feel like I know. I have a bookshelf of ideas in my brain or in my computer or actually in my room that I just like have that I write down and start a journal for a certain show, and then that goes on the bookshelf. So, whenever that's the interesting thing about being a writer is that your work is never done. You go to the next one. And so for me, it's been really important to have a pipeline of stories that I can lead on to when the next one needs to happen because stories like this are the ones that always gravitate toward me that I'm most interested in telling.
Have you been to the house? I think
I
you have.
have.
I was gonna say, I think saw a selfie.
I have been there 10 times in the over the last year.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so have you done the tours? Have you done the paranormal tour?
I have done the tour, I have done the paranormal tour, and I have spent the night every time I've gone.
Ooh. Okay.
Slept in the house 10 times. I'm practically a Borden resident at this
I was
point.
gonna say that's your address. If I ever send you anything, that's where it's going.
Exactly. Well, and it's really interesting because the first time I went by myself. And it's so, I think, easy for us in this field, and I say us as a collective people, to forget when we get interested in these stories that this was something that actually happened to people. You know, regardless of if you think she did it or didn't do it, or regardless of how you feel about Andrew and Abby and what we may or may not know about them, what happened to them was an absolutely brutal murder. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And the first time I set foot in the house, it was such a humbling experience to be reminded that I am now a part of a legacy of, telling their story. And the pressure of that kind of hit me in that moment when I went. I got very emotional because, it was something that I was so detached from and kind of so desensitized to that stepping in that house kind of put everything into perspective again. And I got this new flame underneath my butt that really kind of set me on to go, okay, let's tell their story. And so it's become incredibly important for me in everything we do, no matter if it's a table reading, a presentation, a concert, whatever it might be. I always make sure to speak or have something in the program or on the piece of paper that says that it's in memory of Andrew and Abby. Because at the end of the day, this is,
It was tragic.
it was tragic. Exactly.
When I was researching for my episode with Anthony, I knew the case, but I had
Hmm.
never sat down to truly read about it and learn the history. And like, I haven't done the tour, I haven't been there before, but I know that the tour gives more details that you can't really find online unless you have somebody who actually has been on the tour.
Hmm.
And it was overwhelming, like the injuries and the process of after their bodies were found and then the autopsies and then what happened with their skulls. I mean, it was just like one thing after another. And it was like
Yeah.
these individuals were not, they couldn't rest in peace. I mean, it was this process and then having, from what I read, their heads are separated from their bodies. And I mean, it's just
Hmm.
like, it is,
It's
it's just,
brutal.
yes, it's horrible. And you're 100% correct in that these are people. This actually happened. This is not just a fictional story.
Hmm.
Like these were people's lives and deaths.
Well, and it's so interesting because I also feel like, Lizzie has kind of, well, let me backtrack. I reached out a few months ago to Cara Robertson. She's in my brain. I don't know if this is her official title, but I'm going to give it to her because, I love this woman. She's the best. The world's leading Lizzie Borden historian. She has spent 30 years of her life studying this case, and to the point where she wrote her book that was published by Simon and Schuster, The Trial of Lizzie Borden, which is the first true full collection of like the records and transcripts and everything that kind of has been put into a streamlined chronological order of events through the trial. And whenever I read that book, I was like, I have to meet this woman. I have to talk to her because, especially where she's such an expert in the field of this topic. So what I did is I reached out and we had a Zoom meeting, and I started piecing it together. I was like, wait, she was in that documentary that I watched when I was so young. She was in that documentary as one of the experts that was talking about the case.
Oh, wow.
So then it became this full circle moment for me of like, I'm
Yes.
now speaking with this woman who is kind of the reason that I got fascinated and intrigued by this case. And she actually just flew to New York, and we had her and did a talkback session and an event with her here in the city, and a little special sneak peek of the show. And it's just she's been so incredibly gracious and kind and supportive of the show. I mean, she has had nothing but great things to say about it. We've been so thankful to have her be a part of it. And like I was telling her when she was here, that it wouldn't have happened without her. But all that to say, having this person, that is this expert on the case, and talking with her, we were talking about how it's interesting because Lizzie, and this whole story has kind of become ingrained in almost like a mythology or an urban legend when it actually did
Right.
happen. So I think it's easy, like we had been saying, for us to forget that, this was a person. These were people. This actually happened. It's not this cinematic, story that we have painted it in our heads. It was a thing that actually happened that shocked the world, and that's why we still talk about it.
Exactly. And you probably know this, it was the first case broadcasted across the radio waves and it was
Hmm.
listened to nationwide. So it was like the first form of entertainment, true crime. I say that in quotation marks because
Hmm.
people were listening to it every single day and it became their entertainment. That's what they were focusing on. And they were, that it was the first murder case, it was the first case,
She was the O.J. Simpson of her day. Like
right?
her trial was it grasped the nation in the
Yes.
way that the OJ trial did. It was because what happened is you had this, the differences are obviously there, but for Lizzie's case, it was this woman, seemingly ordinary woman who was a Sunday school teacher, who was a 32-year-old spinster and lived perfectly un a perfectly uninteresting life.
Right.
And all of a sudden this, horrible thing happens. And you also have to, take into fact Andrew Borden's, um, sum of money that he had that made the Bordens a somewhat uh recognizable family in terms of their name and the Borden lineage, all of that stuff, obviously. But for her, it was the whole thing of a woman wasn't capable of this. I mean, society now, we understand that anybody's capable of doing
Right,
something
right,
that
right.
that brutal. But I mean, that's also the whole interesting part of the case, that it became about her gender associating whether or not she could or could not have done it, which I also think, as we've been writing this show, it's been really interesting to look at the societal norms and expectations of women at the time, and how Lizzie, in a lot of ways, was an outspoken advocate for women's rights. I mean, we look at her in her later parts of her life. She donated thousands of dollars to the women's suffrage movement that was happening in the New England area and did all these incredible things for women's rights, for getting women the right to vote and, like, fighting for that whole thing. You kind of look at her and go, well, if she didn't do it, if you take that stance, or if she did, either way, I guess, she was an outspoken woman who was pushing the norms of society at the time. So of course, it's going to be easy for people to look at someone who they would consider to be an outsider or weird, or, not obliging by the societal norms, and say, oh, well, clearly she did it.
She had to do it.
Clearly arrest her.
She's
And
outspoken.
how dare she?
She's an unruly woman.
Well, I mean, I look at the fact that she never wore the morning wear, because, like, at the time, like, whenever, if you were a woman in the 1800s, or, well, that whole Gilded Age America time frame, if your father or your husband died, you were expected to dress in mourning, all black, for a certain amount of time. I think it was like a year. And Lizzie did not do that. She wore blue to the funeral.
Oh,
And
good
so
for her.
exactly. She was just, someone who didn't think that women should be placed in boxes. And that's one of the things, again, just talking in circles at this point, that has been
No,
so
no, it's
interesting.
great.
That's been so interesting writing this show, because you get to do so much more of that back end research, and find out more about her and who she was, and kind of trying to get in her head about what she thought. And the same with Emma.
Well, you're humanizing them.
Mhm.
Whereas I didn't know any of that,
Yeah.
but I know the riddle,
We all know the riddle.
which is not accurate,
Mm-mm.
which is crazy. When I recorded my episode, I put the history in and my mom is one of like my biggest listeners and she doesn't care about paranormal. Like she's just like, my daughter's awesome. And so I always put some history in so that way she knows what we're talking about and some context. Even my mom, who didn't really know about the Lizzie Borden case, she knew who Lizzie Borden was
Hmm.
and she knows the riddle. So, like, I called her and I was like, did you listen to my episode? She goes, yes, it was great. She goes, but you said that I don't know about it. And I was like, well, you're not really into true crime or paranormal. I didn't think you were. And she
Hmm.
recited the riddle. And I was like, Mom,
It's one of those things that has been so interesting writing the show, because every time we go to talk to somebody new about it, to potentially either, you know, take the show somewhere or bring somebody onto the show as like another collaborator, people typically always just know the riddle, and
hmm
they know what they think. they know because of the generational pass down of the story, and how the truth has gotten lost and warped within that.
Right. There's so many things that they don't include when they're
Hmm.
passing down that story. There's so many things that are lost. Oh, and
Yeah.
taking it back to like women in history and her trial, which I found fascinating because I'm a little bit of a feminist. I'm an outspoken woman. I am not scared. I am not a huge woman. I am not scared to stand up and voice. I have a big voice and I want to be heard. And when I want to be heard, you're going to hear me whether you like it or not. And
Yeah,
you don't have to
absolutely.
agree with me. But like her case was tried by 12 men because women weren't allowed on the jury. They weren't allowed to sit on juries until the 1950s.
In
And
Massachusetts, it's crazy.
yes, and I know people, they look at jury duty and they're like, ugh. But I used to work for the federal court system. I did that
Hmm.
for a long time, and I would work with juries, and they are so important. They're truly so important. Sitting on a jury, whether they understand the magnitude of it or not. I mean, this is somebody's lives that you
Yeah,
are contributing to in one way or the
absolutely.
other. I mean, it is a huge responsibility and an honor. Our judges used to say, it's an honor and a privilege. I can't talk.
Well, it's also, you add that whole thing with her case. It's like so interesting to me that here's the thing. The more you really look into the case, there are so many things that don't add up that are really
Mhm.
fishy. And so, but you can't help but wonder, oh, can you pass this off as just circumstantial, that was just a coincidence or something, or X, Y, and Z? There's so many ways you can look at it. The one that always gets me is that after her acquittal, the jury sat down and photographed themselves, wrapped it in a big blue bow, and signed the back of the picture and gave it to Lizzie. And that has always been like, now, why would you do that?
I know. I said that same thing because as somebody who used to manage juries, I think I would have a heart attack and be like, "What are you doing?" But it speaks volumes that they did that.
Imagine if the OJ jury had done that in the 90s, if after his acquittal that they had signed the back of a photo of it. That's another reason why her case was so talked about, because there were
Yeah.
just so many things that were so unprecedented at the time that were just, this didn't happen before. We're so new, or we're so like, what?
But yeah, it's in the pictures in the house.
Hmm. I will say something that's so interesting is I think about this often about how, especially with writing the show, at the end of her life, I mean, after Emma left, her whole life, she wanted that house on the hill. She wanted that life and that lifestyle and that house and what that meant for status and, the emotional weight that that carried for her. And I can't always help but think about when Emma left, how lonely that must have been for her, because that was something she wanted. And then when Emma left, being there by herself, and then also never leaving Fall River, despite being this kind of infamous being of your time in that town. And every year after the trial, they still ran stories on anniversaries of the Borden murders in the papers. I believe there was a certain time. I mean, obviously the articles probably got smaller and smaller as like the years went
Right.
on, but I mean, still having that memory surface every year on that anniversary while you're still, living in the town and you were the person accused. I just can't help but feel how isolating that must have felt for her, but also like so badass at the same time to stay there, that say like, no, this is what I wanted. This was,
Mhm.
and but it's kind of bittersweet in that way. And I also, think about how whenever she died, that whole story resurfacing. And I know that they say that Emma died because of a broken hip, but the timing of Emma's death is a little too coincidental for me, because they were born 10 years apart and died 10 days apart.
I was going to say they died relatively close to each other.
Lizzie died and then Emma died 10 days later. And I believe from what I read, it was Lizzie died of pneumonia and Emma died because of a broken hip. But I don't know. There's always something about that connection that I have just felt in my bones. And that just feels like a lot of emotions resurfacing on an old lady
Yeah.
of, never, I mean, it was 35 years that they hadn't spoken to one another.
Oh my
And I just
gosh.
can't imagine the headlines rushing back, because I mean the headlines that ran said murderess dead. That's what I mean. It was
Yeah.
headlines like that the media took and warped and kind of made to the headlines that she was in again. And so I just can't imagine what that was like opening up the paper that morning and finding out your sister had passed away or whatever that might be, and then all that resurfacing.
So the media was just the same as it is today back then.
Exactly. I mean,
Salacious.
well, and that's been what's so, I will say about with the media, one of the people that I wish she would get talked about more was Elizabeth Jordan. She was the only female reporter that was allowed to cover the Lizzie Borden case.
That
What?
yeah, okay. So I have anytime I record,
Uh-huh.
well, it just said diarrhea. That's hilarious. But I have my spirit talker running in the background and I can see it, but I don't have the volume on because it
Hmm.
is annoying. The first thing that came through is Jordan. And
There we go.
it also said loss of blood, overcomes Nicholas illness. When you were talking about Emma and Lizzie separating, it said come back,
Mm,
spark, and diarrhea, which, we all have some tummy issues every once in a while.
of course. IBS is real.
Exactly. It's a real issue. But when you said Jordan, I was just like, oh my goodness, because that came through and I'm just looking at it as it comes through. And that,
Hmm. Yeah,
yeah,
she was the only woman that was allowed to cover, well, I don't know if she was allowed, but the only woman that did cover Lizzie's case. And it's really interesting the way that Elizabeth Jordan wrote about Lizzie versus all the men reporters. All the men, called her like the American Sphinx, I think was one of her things that they called her because she was just so unemotional during the whole
hmm,
trial. And they talked about what she was wearing and about what things like that. But Elizabeth Jordan was like one of the only people that actually said she's being incredibly brave through this whole trial. She's so poised. She's like handling it with such class and, just spoke to her character. And people also forget during the trial, she was being incredibly heavily drugged with morphine.
right. The doctors were drugging her
The
up.
doctor, yes. So, you look at her and say, "Oh, she's there and being unemotional." Well, she's probably being drugged.
Yeah, she was stoic, but there might be a reason she was so stoic.
Yeah.
The way that Elizabeth humanized her and that you're humanizing the whole family, I mean, it really is it's special.
Thank you. It's one of those things that it has followed me for so long that it just has felt right. And like you were talking about your friend that has had this connection to the house, I
Yeah.
feel like the moment I saw that documentary, there has always just been something about this case that has followed me. I mean, it's come up in my life in really random times where, but if it's a movie or a book that I see or things like that. So then whenever I finally had the idea to let's just write a show about it and then watch it develop into what it has, it's been really, really cool to see that progression.
I think it's incredible. I can cut this out if you want me to,
Oh,
but
you're
I'm
good.
just wondering. So Anthony's take when after he went through the tour, he did the historic tour first, and then he did
Hmm.
the paranormal tour later.
Yeah.
And he said that he believes the uncle did it. Do you have a belief as to who you think did it? I mean, we don't have to talk if you don't want to go into it, that's fine. I'm just
All good. It's actually so interesting because when in our musical, actually, do I want to give this? I'll give
I
it
was
away.
going to say, do you want to give it away? Sorry. It
Wait,
said
wait.
help me speak when you were talking about the story. So that's why I was like putting it there. And then it went to Erie Fog Bank and fire related injuries.
It's interesting because I have gotten phone calls from people at the house, like some like staff and things like that, or emails of things coming up about the show at the house and then like on like little spirit boxes and like saying musical and things like that. And we are actually going back to the house on August 2nd to do a concert of the show at the actual house.
I
So we're
saw
taking
that.
so we're taking the show home for a one performance concert on
Oh my
August 2nd.
gosh. That just gave me chills. I mean, my legs are just chilled up. That is amazing.
Yeah, very excited. But to answer your question, I go back and forth in all the times of research that I have done, I go back and forth on what I actually think. For the show, I have made a decision, but
Right.
for me in my life, I go back and forth. But the one that I tend to lean on is that I don't think she did it.
Right.
I think that John did it. There are
Yeah.
too many things with John's appearance
It's
showing
really
up at the
weird.
house that are really weird. Also, how, Kara talks about this whenever she talks about the case. In terms of a crime scene, it's actually relatively clean. There is no
Hmm.
blood except for around the bodies,
Hmm.
and John was a butcher.
I didn't know
And
that.
so there's just things that just really line up. And yeah, I tend to lean that it was him. Now, do I think that Lizzie was fully innocent. I think Lizzie probably had some momentum in it in terms of maybe knowing
Yeah.
of it happening or something. But I tend to lean on the fact that I don't think she physically did it herself.
Right. Right. That's kind of where I'm at with it as well. I think John just showing up and then leaving, and I didn't know he was a butcher.
Hmm.
Yikes.
Yeah, because I mean, you also, I mean, whenever the one thing that always interests fascinates me is under Andrew's head when he was sleeping was his folded up Prince Albert coat.
Right.
And it had, I was obviously soaked in blood, but one of the theories is whoever killed could have put it on backwards to shield their out to their clothing, and then would have done it. There's so
Hmm.
many theories that you can entertain and talk about with how it could have been done, but really interesting.
But as for paranormal, when you stay there, did you have any experiences in the house?
I did. The first time I was there, I was doing the little tour down in the basement, and
Ooh.
it was me, and there were three of us plus the staff member that was there, and we were down there in the basement. We thought we were talking to Bridget. That's kind of what we had thought who was coming through. And we asked a question about to Bridget, and across the room, we were down in the basement. We were the only ones in the house because at that night there were only those three of us staying in the house.
Right.
Across the basement, kind of toward the staircase where you would go up, we hear this deep no, like a deep, low voice no.
Oh.
And I just got goosebumps again thinking
Uh-huh.
about it. It was just one of those things where I definitely think it was Andrew if I had to guess, just the way that the voice was and
Right.
everything. But my flight or fight kicked in, and my I was like, let me go over there and see. Walked right over there, nothing there. And that was so scary, but really cool. And then the other thing that happened is I was staying in the John Morse room, which is the room that Abby Borden was killed in.
Right.
I stayed in that room. And there was a point in the night where I woke up and I couldn't get back to sleep because I had like this like weird feeling in the back of my neck, in the back of my head, which like, interesting for where you're staying and what happened in that room. And there was, I swear to God, I have never felt something like this before, but it was like a full hand on my, like press into my back. And as soon as I turned around, I mean, obviously there was nothing there, but that I've never had something like that happen to me before as well. So,
Well, Anthony, when he was in the basement, he felt pain. Him and his son both had pain in their head.
mhm,
Like I think where when we were talking, he said it was like right here, right on the top of his head. But
mhm.
that's, you're the second person that I've talked to about this case that have said they've had some kind of like head pain or, just kind of sensation where they feel like their head is hurting.
I will say though, it's interesting because I've only had those experiences twice. Every other time that I've gone there, it's been very quiet and very just like still in terms of the energy.
Was that the same visit?
No, there were two separate visits.
Okay.
The first one with the voice was the first time, and the hand one was actually this past December.
Oof.
Um, so like there were in that the first time I went was in May, so there had been plenty of time in between there that I had been. So it's just interesting, like how there are sometimes when I go and I don't feel a single thing when I walk in that house, and then sometimes you walk in and the air feels different. You're like, mm. But we
Mm,
also have to remember so much happened there,
yeah.
like so much, dark energy, negative energy
Yeah.
has existed in that house for the last 132 years. And sometimes, I don't think it helps that we resurface it sometimes when we talk about it and stuff, but especially in the house. But it's just interesting. I mean, that's why this case will live on for the next 132 years, is because, all the things that surround it and the unknown with it.
Right. And I also think, because all the paranormal investigators go there, and I truly believe that investigators and just people in general, we carry our own energy with us when we travel to places and when they
Hmm.
are there. And you have some paranormal investigators, and I'm not talking smack against anybody, but you have some that are like, it's all demonic, it's all negative, and they seek out the negative and the darkness. And I believe they bring darkness with them, and you find what you seek. And so
100%.
I think maybe that might have something to do with it. It depends, like if you've been there after maybe an investigator's been there and
Hmm.
they have brought that darkness with them, and that might charge the house in a different way than it would have been if nobody has been there for a little while, or you have somebody like yourself who's not seeking out like demons. It's all demonic, that's all negative, it's evil, and it's scratching people and it's attacking people. I mean, I think it truly makes a difference.
I agree. And that's also a thing. This is maybe a hot take, and I don't want to, challenge the business that the house is right now with like the bed and breakfast and things like that. So like this is my own opinion, not related or affiliated with them. Um, I also, with my experience with paranormal and things like that, I don't think that they would have chosen to stay there in their afterlife. I think that whenever we reach out to them, I think that they have the ability to come through to us from that place because that place is such a void of energy
Hmm.
and a lighthouse in a way for
Yeah.
spirits to kind of go to because of that energy and what happened there. And but I like to think that they're probably somewhere different, that they probably had a more of their happy times. That's what I like to choose to believe. Like I think Lizzie's probably at Maplecroft. I think Emma's probably at Maplecroft too, because I like to think that Lizzie and Emma are probably together in the afterlife after their many years of separation together. I like to think that they probably chose to reunite and be
Yeah.
together.
Well, what Anthony said is that Lizzie Borden has not been her spirit has not been picked up in the house. They said whenever they do pick her up or they believe to have picked her up, it's outside.
Hmm.
And so
Oh,
I
that's
think,
interesting.
yeah, he said that there's a woman that they see outside the perimeter of the house, and she might be peeking in the windows, but they've never, I'm
Hmm.
not going to say never because I don't know, but they usually do not pick Lizzie up in the house. So it's like
Yeah.
like she's being strong-willed in death. She's like, I'm not going back in there.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't blame her. I mean, oh my gosh, if that place had caused me the grief and the, you know, lifetime of isolation and, being ostracized, I wouldn't want to go back there.
Right. Yeah, so that it definitely makes sense, but he believes as well that, the Bordens might be there, but he does not think Lizzie's there.
Mhm.
He thinks, and he also says, so what he does is he likes to go to cemeteries and he'll talk to the people and he's like, it's kind of like a telephone. When you start talking to that person, it's like they have a receiver and they pick it
Yep.
up, and it's not like they're just laying there waiting on you. You talk to them and they're like, oh, somebody needs me.
No, but yeah, it's there. It's just interesting, like all the different energies places. Like I remember when I went to Oak Grove Cemetery for the first time to see their graves. That was another moment that was very humbling and a reminder of this is a story of real people. But it's also, and I say this not with the way that it's going to sound, but like their graves are very plain for a story
Yeah,
that has become such an infamous thing.
right.
Their graves are just simple, flat,
Ordinary.
ordinary headstones. I mean, it's not even like the tall ones. It's just the very small,
Yeah.
flat ones. Another reminder that, we were all just people. We were ordinary. They were ordinary people that a a bad, extraordinary thing happened to.
I'm going to switch gears here. Have you ever been to
Mhm.
any other haunted places?
I have the first paranormal experience that I ever had was I'm from Kentucky, and
Uh-huh.
so I had gone to the Waverly Hill Sanatorium. This was in 2016,
Ooh.
and we did me and my group of friends in school. We did one of those like overnight things where they kind of
Uh-huh.
take you. It was a huge group, and they kind of split us up and based on different glow stick colors. And they were like red group, blue group, whatever group. Our group was the yellow group. We went downstairs in the morgue tunnels first, and then we did that, and then went up through into, oh gosh, what was it? It was the morgue tunnels. Oh, like the operating rooms, I think that are
Right.
down there. So I don't
Yeah.
remember the exact, but we were down there first. And as we were walking, I had on like one of those like pull drawstring bags
Uh-huh.
and a light blue t-shirt. And I remember I was walking down and we were toward the back of the group and there was like a guide in the back and a guide in the front. And I felt this like burning sensation on like the back of my shoulder. And I was like, what is going on? And I thought it was like the drawstring bag, like chafing my shoulder or something. So I took it off and my friend Catherine was behind me and she was like, what's on your shoulder? And I was like, what do you mean? And I pulled it up and I saw blood was seeping through
Oh my
my
gosh.
shirt. We raised up my shirt. I had three scratches from the top of my shoulder blade to the center of my back.
Oh my
Um,
goodness.
it was one of the most horrific things that has ever happened to me because how did that get there? And so they actually have an on-site priest that I got pulled inside a room and they like washed the wound with holy water and help bandage up because there was also like a medic and they said like some prayers with me and because things in demonic things come in threes because it's a mockery to the
Right.
Trinity with the
Yes.
Father, the
Yes.
Son, and the Holy Spirit. And so um it was just very chilling.
That
So
is
that was
wild.
That was that place and the Borden house are the only places that I have been.
Those are some good ones.
They're I love when I get to talk to people that do what they call like the little New England Trinity, which is like the Borden House, Salem, Massachusetts, and the Conjuring House, because those three
Oh,
are in like that little triangle radius of each
mm-hmm.
other. So people usually trifecta, that's what they call it. A lot of people will go and do that, which I think is really funny and fun. But because I've never been to Salem yet, I've been to Sleepy Hollow. I don't know if that counts as like a
I don't know much about Sleepy Hollow. I haven't looked into that, but I do want to look into Salem witch trials. But I get a little overwhelmed when I do the witch trials because it was
yeah,
so senseless.
yeah.
I mean, I did the witch trial of Winsboro, which is here in South Carolina. It's probably about an hour and a half from where
Hmm.
we live. And that was just, I mean, that took place within a matter of like a few weeks. Whereas Salem witch trials, I mean, it was like a year of just
Yep.
nonstop brutality. And I mean, just, it's so senseless. It was just so
It was
senseless.
horrible.
Yes. I mean, any kind of violence is senseless, but that, like, there was absolutely no reason other than just hysteria.
It's also just so, I mean, the Salem witch trials and Lizzie Borden for me in a lot of ways are based around the same thing. It's just we as a society fear strong women, and we still do. And
Yes.
and I think that all of these things just always go back to that point. And whenever people ask me why I'm writing Borden and why we need it in 2025, I say here, this is why. Because this is a story about a woman who is so outspoken, and when something happened that was so terrible to her family because of the way she was and who she kind of became the easy target to point to. I mean,
Yeah.
yes, there are things that also
Right.
pointed to her, but at the end of the day, that is always going to be in the subconscious mind of people
Hmm.
because that's just how it's always been, unfortunately, and how until we actually enact change, that's what how it's going to continue to be. But all these stories for me are connected in that way.
So where's your show going to be? Like you say it's going on August 2nd. It's going
Mhm.
to be in the Borden House. You're going to have I guess like the concert is what you said. But where's the show going? Where's the musical going to be?
Well, that's the question of the year.
Oh.
We no we it's one of those things where we're the for those that don't know that are listening, it's really interesting because they say it takes 7 years maximum to write a musical. Well, not maximum, minimum typically, because the musicals take a long journey. You have to, as you're writing, you have all the different development phases. You have the crowdfunding and the producers raising money. You have the workshops. You have the out of town tryouts. It just, it goes on and on and on. And so for us, we're still in like the development writing phase. The book of the show is done, the script. We're still working on some stuff with the music, but it's been really beautiful to see how this show has come together in such a short amount of time and the amount of love and, interest that we've experienced from people. I mean, the Instagram following that we got kind of blew up overnight, it felt like. And so it's been a nice assurance that this story is one that people want to hear and people want to experience. So like as we keep developing, we'll post updates on our social media, which is Borden Musical or bordenmusical.com is our website. We are excited. We have a couple of things in the works actually in Kentucky, next my home state, and the next year, some performances and stuff that will be open to the public where people can come and see it. But yeah, we're trucking along. Hopefully a Broadway run one day. That's the goal. That's the goal. But we still have a little bit of a journey ahead of us. And for us, it's been more important to take the show to these smaller places first, so that way we can really build that community that we want to bring along the road with us and give people a little sneak peek into what a new musical is like before you see all the shiny stuff on Broadway.
I think it's great. And I think like this story in particular is true crime fans love it.
Mhm.
Paranormal people love it. And it is such, I know with the paranormal, because that's usually where I fall into
Yeah.
with my podcast is this community is absolutely incredible and they are supportive and they show up in a different kind of way than other groups and communities that I have been a part of or that I've witnessed. So I think you are onto something. I think you're going to have an overwhelming support of I know from my group because we love Lizzie Borden. We're interested in hearing this side of it and the different takes on it. I mean, it really does make you think and it makes you challenge what you were taught way
Hmm.
before, just like you at 6, which is Very young.
Yeah. Well, it's, and one of those things too, it's like as we're going on down the road, if like there's anybody that wants to reach out and like figure out how they can support or be a part of the journey, don't, hesitate to reach out to me, because creating a new show is one of those things where you're able to really kind of welcome people in, whether it be through financial support or just emotional support by following along the journey and tapping a like on a photo. All of that means the world. So like for us,
Mhm.
it's just really building that community that's gonna kind of carry us through to a
Mhm.
Broadway run one day.
Yep, there's more support than just financial. Just that share, 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 getting the word
Yep,
out there that just builds
exactly.
so much. So tell everybody where they can find you when on Instagram, because I think, do you have a TikTok? Does your page have a TikTok?
We do, yeah. So my personal socials are Cavan K Hendron on everything. That's my website, my Instagram, all this stuff. And then for Borden, it's at Borden Musical across all the platforms and everything as well.
Okay, well, I'm going to be finding you on TikTok because where all my paranormal stuff, I'm bigger on TikTok and I'm not huge. So don't get too excited. I'm not huge yet, but I'm working on it. I'm working
We'll
on
do
it.
we'll do it together.
Heck yeah, man. But I'm going to make sure I'm going to tag you everywhere. I'm going to share, share,
Thank
share.
you.
I'm going to try to get I know Anthony will share because like I said, he's super connected to the Borden house and
He follows us on social media.
he does.
I've seen
Yes.
his stuff on socials. Yeah.
Oh, he's going to be tickled. Yes, he does. And that's how I found you. That's kind of like, because I think
Small world.
it's because of Anthony. He's incredible. I texted him last night and I was like, you will not believe what message I got in my Instagram folder today. So,
It
but
was
yes,
meant to be.
it was. This has been incredible. Thank you so much. Any final words? What can people expect at the show with?
Oh my gosh, no, yeah, I would just say like at the end of the day, this show is about love and
Mm,
it's about family and how those two things are very complicated sometimes.
you
And
got that right.
and then you throw a murder into it, and oh boy, is it get harder. Um, but I would also just say to anybody listening that feels like that they have a story that's like that they've always been attached to and fascinated with in some way, and you want to do something with it, go for it. I mean, like have been saying, there's no handbook on how to do this. What you have to do is have to have belief and passion for something and have that fire underneath you to go for it, because we're the voices that are going to shape the future of, not only the entertainment industry, but the world. I mean, the arts have always been kind of a step ahead of everything because this is
Hmm.
how we raise awareness and we just talk about things. So I would encourage everybody, if you have a story on your heart, tell it and find a way to tell it, because it's not worth just sitting on and letting it go untold.
I love that. Well, thank you so, so much. I truly appreciate you reaching out and giving me this opportunity to talk to you about this. I am so excited.
Thank you so much.
And yes, I'll be watching and I'll be supporting and I'll be waiting because when it does come, I don't care where I gotta go. I'm coming.
Please. Oh my gosh. And I'll make sure I send you a video of if you're not able to make it to the concert in August. I'll make sure I get a video to you so you can see some stuff.
Yay. I love that. I'm so excited. Thank you so much. This has
Thank you
been
so
a
much.
pleasure.
I'm sure we'll talk more in the future too. So
Yes, please. Thank you, Cavan, for coming on the show and telling us all about Borden the musical and just about your paranormal experiences and what your opinions are on it. And I just loved hearing from you. It is such a different thing than what I typically cover. And that is why I'm Ghost Gossip, because I love gossiping about anything that is involved in this community. So thank you again for this privilege. It was an honor. Guys, go check out Borden the Musical. You can find it on Instagram and TikTok. Check out their website. Also, while you're on Instagram and TikTok, make sure you go follow Anthony. He is Anthony Ghost Guy, and he is the reason that we are here. So give him some support. He is amazing. Also, while you're there, I have a YouTube. Go follow my YouTube. Subscribe, like, do all the things. It is Ghost Gossip 24/7. You can find me on TikTok, where I am the most active, Ghost Gossip Pod, and Instagram, where it is lagging behind, but I am there, and it is special all on its own, and that is Ghost Gossip Podcast. Like, share, please. Spread the word. If you are interested in being a guest on the show, please email me, ghostgossip247@gmail.com. And as always, until next time, they'll see you later. That was, not published. Oh, sorry. I am in perimenopause and my brain. The brain fog is so real. It is so real.
I feel you.
I'll just be talking and then I'll be like, I forgot. Sorry.